Hi, this is Mike Emmer, your adjunct instructor, and today we will do Chapter 4, Consciousness. The previous chapter we really looked at sensation and how we can be aware of the world around us and how we can receive that information and then be able to perceive that information. Consciousness is basically the ability to be aware of this information that's around us. These are the learning objectives of what it means to be conscious, different levels, the need for sleep, different stages of sleep, how to differentiate among disorders of sleep, theories of why people dream, and gender and cultural differences. We're also going to look at hypnosis, theories of hypnosis, meditation and its benefits. Then we're going to look at psychoactive drugs. These are mood-altering chemicals. We'll be able to distinguish between physical and psychological dependence, describe the effects of stimulants, depressants, hallucinogens. And then we're going to look at how our consciousness can explain supernatural visitations. First of all, consciousness. This is a person's awareness of everything that's going on around him or her at any given moment. If you have access to my Psych Lab, I put these links on the PowerPoint. What is consciousness? And then what are some ways that you multitask? Let's have a note about multitasking. I know a lot of you love to use cell phones and texting, and I really want you to hold true to this, that all psychological evidence has found about texting and driving. Contrary to popular belief, we cannot really multitask. Texting and talking on the telephone while we're driving, it puts heavy demands on our conscious awareness and thus the safety of ourselves and everyone else who's on the road. So please do not text and drive. That is something you don't want to practice. Also, we're going to talk about drug and alcohol use. Please do not use drugs and drive. You put yourself at risk and then also everyone else who's on the road since you're driving a 2,000-pound vehicle down the street. First of all, waking consciousness. This is a state in which thoughts, feelings, and sensations are clear and organized, and the person feels alert. This concludes any thoughts, feelings, sensations while we're awake. Then there's what's called the altered states of consciousness. This is where the shift in quality of pattern of mental activity is compared to waking consciousness. So this could be affected by drugs, could be affected by sleep. We all have an altered state when we fall asleep. Through distraction, meditation, daydreaming, or when we're hypnotized. Those are all altered states of consciousness. Optional survey here is what altered states have you experienced? Next, let's look at sleep. William James called it the gentle tyrant, that it's something that we all need in order to be healthy. The circadian rhythm it's a cycle of body rhythm that occurs over a 24-hour period. Circa means about, and diem means day. So every day we really need this sleep. During sleep, the brain releases what's called melatonin. The hypothalamus is what directs that change. It's sensitive to light, and it calls suprachiasmatic nucleus to release the melatonin. This internal clock, it tells us when to wake up and when to fall asleep. The hypothalamus is an important part in sleep. It's a tiny section of the brain that influences the glandular system. The suprachiasmatic nucleus is deep within the hypothalamus, and it regulates that internal clock. The hypothalamus tells the pineal gland to secrete melatonin, and that's what makes a person feel sleepy. So it's also it's light sensitive, so when it's daytime, it stops producing melatonin, and that creates us to want to wake up. And when it's dark, melatonin is produced, and that makes us feel sleepy. Probably the invention of the light bulb has really altered our sleep patterns significantly because we have the ability to stay up all night. Um, Examples of microsleeps. These are brief side steps into sleep that only last a few seconds. There's no REM in a microsleep. Sleep deprivation is when you have a significant loss of sleep. It results in irritability, problems with concentration. It affects our mental and physical functioning. So let's say if you stay up all night for studying for a test, it will affect your ability to function well the next morning. These show sleep patterns of infants and adults. Notice that infants need a lot more hours of sleep. They have a lot more REM sleep, which their brain is actually still forming. Notice as you get older, as you reach 30, 40, 50 years old, the total amounts of daily sleep, there's less required. First of all, the stages of sleep. When you get into a deep level of sleep, you have what's called rapid eye movement. Okay, this is a stage of sleep in which eyes move rapidly on their eyelids and a person is typically experiencing a dream. And non-REM sleep is any stages that do not include the deepest level of rapid eye movement. When you put a brain under, if you study a brain, you can study what's called an electroencephalograph, or you can study brainwave patterns. This allows scientists to see brainwave activity as a person passes through the various steps of sleep and to determine what type of sleep the person has entered. The first level of sleep, there's what's called alpha waves. They indicate a state of relaxation or light sleep. Second is theta waves. This is where the brain waves are indicating the early stages of sleep. And then we have what's called delta waves, which are long, slow waves that indicate the deepest level of sleep. This chart takes a look at the different levels of sleep. Stage 1, N1, theta waves. Stage N2, we have spindles and bursts of activity. Stage N3, where you have your deep non-REM sleep. And then notice the brainwaves change with delta waves, deep non-REM waves. And then stage R, where you have REM sleep. And notice there's bursts of what's synchronous vertical eye movements with low wattage continuous theta with minimal beta. So that kind of shows brain activity during sleep. Like what I mentioned in the chart, they label stages of sleep as N1, which is light sleep, where there are some images that you might experience. You might have what's called the hypnic jerk. If you ever have when you're sleeping and all of a sudden that's the hypnic jerk. Could be your knees, legs, or your whole body jerks. Some psychologists think it's kind of ancestral behavior. When we slept in trees, the jerk prevents us to fall from the hypothetical tree onto the ground. I think that's an interesting hypothesis. N2 is the second stage of sleep where the sleep spindles are activated. As we have a brief bursts of activity only lasting a second or two. Next is N3, where the delta waves are more pronounced. This is the deepest stage of sleep. 54% or more waves are delta waves. The body's at the lowest level of functioning. It's a time in which growth occurs. So for children that are growing, especially adolescents and toddlers, it's very important that they get full amounts of sleep. Next, boys tend to sleep more deeply than girls due to high levels of testosterone, which it helps lead to deeper sleep. Next is REM sleep and dreaming. REM sleep is a paradoxical sleep. It's, in other words, the body's relaxed, but there's a high level of brain activity. So if you're awakened during REM sleep, usually you'll remember your dream. The REM rebound is when you have increased amounts of REM sleep after being deprived of sleep on earlier nights. So your body tries to compensate. This shows the progression of REM sleep during the night of different stages. So it looks like we travel in and out of different stages throughout the night. different stages of sleep. Let's talk about the negative things of sleep. Nightmares. These are bad dreams that happen during REM sleep. Um, I don't know, I get what's called sleep paralysis. That's where your voluntary muscles are paralyzed during REM sleep. Now, this could be a good thing because if you're actually running from a bad thing in a sleep, you're not going to actually take off running. Sleep paralysis keeps you from actually physically running from what you're experiencing in your dream. REM behavior disorder, this is when there's a mechanism that blocks the movement, fails. In other words, you have a bad dream and you actually do thrash around, get up, and act out your nightmares. It's not a good thing. So sleep paralysis is actually a good thing to keep you from getting up and running around during your sleep. At the end of your book, they talk about what's called supernatural visitations. Some people report being abducted by aliens, having visitations of people from the outer world while they're sleeping. Psychologists say it's more likely, instead of that they're being abducted by a space alien, is that they're having what's called hypnagogic hallucination. And this is a hallucination that can occur just as you're entering N1 level sleep. Then there's what's called the hypnopompic hallucination. And this is a hallucination that a person experiences just as a person is in a state between REM sleep, where your voluntary muscles are paralyzed, remember the sleep paralysis, and they're fully awake. So they're actually like in a dream state and feeling like they're fully awake. But they're also experiencing sleep paralysis, which means they're experiencing hallucination, but they're also in that aware state at the same time. Sleepwalking. This is called somnambulism. It's an episode of moving around and walking around in one sleep. This occurs during deep sleep. It's more common among children and among adults. I remember having a few cases of this where I would wake up in another room. It was pretty scary. I was like, how did I get here? But it's not really that common. 20% of the population experience sleepwalking. It's partially due to heredity. Next, let's talk about night terrors. This is when you have a nightmare and you experience extreme fear and screams or run around during deep sleep. You're not fully awake. It's relatively a rare disorder, but you wake up screaming. Insomnia is the inability to get sleep, stay asleep, or get a good quality sleep. This is best treated with behavior modification and exercise. A lot of people will take melatonin or some sort of tranquilizer, prescribed tranquilizer, to help them to sleep. However, that's over long-term chronic taking tranquilizers is not good for you. It's better treated with behavior modification, like avoid any caffeine drinks towards the evening, exercise, maybe some therapy to deal with some things that are bothering you that's keeping you from closing your mind and going to sleep. Sleep apnea is a disorder where you stop breathing for nearly half a minute or more during your sleep. There is treatment called the CPAP, which creates a continuous positive airway pressure device. There's a video on insomnia if you have access to the MyPsych lab. Next is narcolepsy. This is a disorder in which a person falls immediately to REM sleep during the day without warning. Cataplexy is a sudden loss of muscle tone. But this is where a person is totally awake and then they just indiscriminately fall asleep. Not healthy, especially if you're driving. So this takes a look at a summary of all the disorders: the sleepwalking, somnambulism, night terrors. You've probably heard of restless leg syndrome, where you have uncomfortable sensations in the legs causing movement and loss of sleep. Nocturnal leg cramps, painful cramps in calf, foot, or muscles. Hypersomnia, which is excessive daytime sleepiness. And circadian rhythm disorders. This is a disturbance of the sleep-wake cycle. This is like if you go have what's called jet lag, or you're shifting work from the day shift to the night shift, and you're really having a hard time adjusting to the change of schedule. Enuresis is urinating while asleep in bed. There's also another one called encopresis, and that's where you defecate while you're in bed. Usually these would be common. This may be common among people who have been sexually abused. Freud, in his book Interpretations of Dreams in 1900, took a serious look at dreams. And he basically saw dreams as wish fulfillments. He says that we have wishes, and that's what we try to figure out. So what we're dreaming is trying to figure out what we want to happen. Dreams reveal problems from conflicts and events buried deep in our unconscious. Next is the activation synthesis hypothesis. And this one was started by Weber. And he said dreams are created by higher centers of the cortex to explain the brainstem's activation of cortical cells during REM sleep periods. In other words, I'll show it in the next screen. There's a little test of this if you want to take this through my social lab. Basically, the pons relays messages over to the cortex, okay? And then the thalamus relays the information to the cortex. I'm sorry, the pons sends it to the thalamus, and then the thalamus sends it to the cortex. The cortex actually simulates sensations as if you're awake. In other words, it plays out the dream, okay? Another theory is called the activation information mode model. In other words, it revises the activation synthesis explanation, saying that information that's accessed during the waking hours can have an influence on your dreams. So if you're struggling with a problem or a big issue or stressed out about something during the day, chances are that information might seep into your dreams. So the information that you experience during the day might get processed during the dreams. There's a little survey about dreams, and then there's a concept map about sleep if you want to look at that under my social lab. Next is hypnosis. Hypnosis is a state of consciousness in which a person is especially susceptible to suggestion. Now, there's a lot of myths about hypnosis and therapy. Let's go over a few of these here. First of all, the main elements of hypnosis is the hypnotist tells the subject to focus on what is being said. The subject's told to relax and feel tired. The hypnotist tells the subject to let go and accept suggestions easily. And the subject is told to use vivid imagination. Now, there's something called hypnotic susceptibility, and this is a degree to which a person could be a good hypnotic subject. Now, they basically say 80% of the population can be hypnotized, but only 40% are really good hypnotist subjects. Here's some, so basically hypnosis can be a handy way for people to learn to relax, to control willpower. However, 25% of hypnosis, there's a 25% chance of what's called false recollection of memories. For instance, hypnosis does not improve your memory. It does not improve your memory recollection. For instance, if while you're not hypnotized, you say, you know what, I don't quite recall what happened. You put a person under hypnosis, it doesn't improve their recollection. What it does is it improves their confidence from being not sure what they recollected to becoming more sure, and they might even just kind of fill in the spaces. So that's kind of the tricky part about hypnosis when used for court cases and to be, for someone to be a witness in a trial. So hypnosis can create amnesia for whatever happens during the session, at least for brief time. It cannot give people superhuman strength. People may use their full strength under hypnosis, but it's no more than they had before. Hypnosis can relieve pain, by allowing a person to remove conscious attention from the pain. It cannot reliably enhance memory. There's an increased risk of false memory retrieval because of suggestible state hypnosis creates. It can alter sensory perceptions, smell, hearing, vision, time, and ability to see visual illusions. It cannot regress people back to their childhood. Although people may act like children, they do and say things children would not. Hypnosis can help people relax in situations they normally would cause them stress, such as flying on an airplane, but they cannot regress people to some past life. There is no scientific evidence for past life regression. Also, people cannot be hypnotized against their will. Now, there's two theories about hypnosis and how it works. One is called hypnosis as dissociation. That hypnosis works only in a person's immediate consciousness, while a hidden observer remains aware of all that was going on. Ernest Hilgard in 1991 came up with this theory. He says that it's like part of your conscious brain is still aware, but just not conscious of what's really happening. So when you're under hypnosis, you're still aware, but kind of like that hidden observer. I guess the best example is, have you ever driven somewhere down a regular path and you're like, oh my God, I just have no recollection of the last 3 miles I traveled. I hope I was paying attention. Obviously you weren't in an accident, so you were kind of consciously driving, but your mind was somewhere else. It was attending to some other problem. So that would be an example of hypnosis, where you're dissociated with the, when you're under hypnosis, you're dissociated with everything else, and you're open to suggestion. The second theory is called the social cognitive theory of hypnosis. And that's basically says people who are hypnotized are not in an altered state, but merely playing the role expected of them in the situation. I don't know if you've ever went to a comedian hypnotist at a comedy club, and he or she may hypnotize a bunch of people and suggest them to do a lot of crazy things, like tell them that the room is getting hot and they start taking their clothes off, and then the room starts getting cold and they start putting clothes on. It's kind of funny, it's humorous. Whether they're truly hypnotized or just playing the role, I guess the jury is out on some of these. Next is meditation. Meditation is a series of mental exercises meant to refocus attention and achieve a trance-like state of consciousness. This may be focusing on your breath, focusing on your thoughts, clearing all thoughts out of your mind. What it does is it helps physically create relaxation. It may help with coping skills. It lowers your blood pressure, lowers your heart rate, and may help you deal with chronic pain. There's a little video on meditation here if you have access to my psych lab. And basically it says that meditation can create permanent positive changes in the brain. The term is neuroplasticity, that the brain changes with your behavior. And by practicing meditation in your life, they found out that the cortex, cerebral cortex, tends to be more dense or has gained mass compared to the control groups that do not use meditation. Our next section was going to look at psychoactive drugs. Psychoactive drugs are drugs that alter our thinking, perception, and memory. These are mood-altering chemicals that people may take as prescription drugs, which means prescribed by a doctor, or non-prescription, which would be an illegal form of taking the drug, or they could be non-prescription over-the-counter drugs. Physical dependence is where your body creates a tolerance, which means as you take this on a regular basis, you may find that you may need more of the drug to achieve the same effect. For instance, if you start drinking beer and you start drinking more regularly, you might find out you might need to drink more to have the same effect. The second physical dependence is what's called withdrawal. And this is where you have physical symptoms resulting from a lack of an addictive drug in your system. So let's say if I had alcohol dependence, and I'd continue to drink and drink and drink on a regular basis, and abuse on a regular basis, quitting may cause physical withdrawal. And this may include nausea, pain, tremors, crankiness, hallucinations, and high blood pressure. I remember working in a chemical dependency treatment place where a person thought they had spiders, and they would always be scraping the spiders off their arms. Obviously, there was no spiders. It was a hallucination, but they believed it was there. A psychological dependence is where the feeling that the drug is needed to continue a feeling of emotional or psychological well-being. For instance, marijuana is not physically dependent. You do not become physically dependent on marijuana. However, I've known some people who have to take it every day in order to feel normal. That's an example of psychological dependence to the drug. Stimulants are drugs that increase the functioning of the nervous system. Synthesized drugs that are stimulants are called amphetamines. They're made in labs, rather found in nature. You probably heard of methamphetamines or crank, very common drug. What it does is it's a stimulant. Cocaine is a natural drug, produces euphoria, energy, power, and pleasure. What it does is it increases the amount of stimulants in the brain. Little known fact, Coca-Cola up until 1903 carried several milligrams of cocaine per can, and it was actually sold as a prescription drug instead of as a soft drink. It had, they claimed, medicinal uses for Coca-Cola. After 1903, they still use the same plant, but it's after the cocaine is removed from the plant. Nicotine is an active ingredient in tobacco, very, very psychologically addictive. And then caffeine is a stimulant found in coffee, tea, and most sodas, chocolate, even over-the-counter drugs. Key thing about nicotine is the harmful effects are now well known, but many people continue to smoke or chew tobacco in spite of warnings. I had a friend who was my age who died 2 years ago from chewing tobacco, caused cancer within his mouth and his throat. Died an untimely death because of his habit with chewing tobacco. Also, there's a new trend. Well, smoking is pretty much not allowed in any bars or food establishments, schools, pretty much any public place. But it's still marketed to, and it's still very psychologically dependent. It's easy to get psychologically dependent to it. So although there's a lot of rules in place to make it more inconvenient to smoke, the drug is still very available. It's legal. It's expensive. It's a very expensive habit. But the new trend is now it's called smokeless nicotine. People say, well, it doesn't have the same physical effects, but the psychological addiction is still very real, and it's a big money-making market. And they're attracting a younger crowd like yourselves with different flavored smokeless nicotine and stuff like that. Beware. Okay, next are depressants. These are drugs that decrease the functioning of the nervous system. Barbiturates are depressant drugs that have a sedative effect. Benzodiazepines are drugs that lower anxiety and reduce stress. And then you probably heard of Rohypnol. This is a date rape drug. What it does is it's an anti-anxiety, it's a muscle relaxant. But what it does is if you take it, it makes your memory of the night before quite fuzzy, and makes you a little more suggestible. They used to put, I guess people used to put it in people's drinks to try to rape them during the day, and hopefully the next day they wouldn't remember it. You probably heard of Bill Cosby. He's being charged with this, using this type of drug. The current drug now, it's not legal in the United States, but in other countries they make it with a blue dye. So if someone puts in your drink, it'll turn your drink blue. So if your drink turns blue for any reason, don't drink it. Or if you go to a party, really monitor your drink and make sure nobody puts anything in it. Alcohol, the chemical resulting from fermentation or distillation of various kinds of vegetable matter. It's often mistaken as a stimulant, but alcohol is actually a depressant. It affects your central nervous system. If you're concerned about your own drinking or that of a family member, try this link. It's called alcoholscreening.org, and it kind of walks you through the process. Alcohol is the number one alcoholism is the number one addiction in the United States. One, because alcohol is legal. Two, it's very readily acceptable by most cultures. 10 to 20 million people in the United States suffer from alcoholism. Number two, the addiction would be to nicotine. And number three would be marijuana. This takes a look at blood alcohol. So if you drink a can of beer, it's the same as drinking a 12-ounce can of beer is the same as a 4-ounce glass of wine, which is the same as a 1 shot of liquor. So if you have a mixed drink that has a shot of liquor in it, that has about the same amount. So if you understand those, each one of those is a drink. So if you have 3 shots, you just had 3 drinks. And same as 3 cans of beer or 3 glasses of wine. Now, some places alcohol content is different, so you have to also take that into account as well. Like usually beer is 4 to 5% alcohol, but I've been to some of these brew pubs where the beer is actually 10% alcohol. So it's important that you pay attention to alcohol level too as well of your drink. Usually if you have 1 or 2 drinks, your blood alcohol level will be like 0.05. You're considered judgment impaired. So if you start driving, you're at an increased risk of collision. If you have 3 to 5 drinks, would make you at 0.1 alcohol. This is where you would be considered impaired driving. You can get what's called a drunk driving. You could be charged for drunk driving. So if you have more than 1 or 2 drinks an hour, or 1 or 2 drinks, please don't drive. Notice as you drink more, your blood alcohol content is higher, and to the point where if you have way too many drinks, you could have what's called alcohol poisoning. You probably notice when people vomit when they drink, that's an involuntary response to alcohol poisoning. And your body is getting rid of the alcohol so you don't die of alcohol poisoning or die of an overdose. Some people drink so fast that involuntary response cannot respond, and that's when you'd have to go to the hospital and have your stomach pumped. So you don't have alcohol poisoning or die of an overdose of alcohol. Let's talk about narcotics. These are opium-related drugs. They suppress the sensation of pain by binding to and stimulating the nervous center's natural receptor sites. In other words, they create endorphins. Normally, endorphins is a pain reliever that our body produces when we're experiencing pain. These narcotics are extremely, extremely addictive, highly addictive. Don't take them, ever, unless prescribed by a doctor. Opium is a substance made from the opium poppy and from which all narcotic drugs are derived. Morphine is a narcotic drug derived from opium. It's used to treat severe pain. Interesting fact is in the early 1900s, you could get morphine syrup without a prescription. And around that same time, the Women's Christian Temperance Union is an organization that pushed for the prohibition of alcohol. Morphine syrup was real commonly used by higher income families, mostly women. So probably the same women who are pushing for prohibition were also active morphine users. And also before 1903, they drank Coca-Cola. So interesting concept. Heroin is a narcotic drug derived from opium that is extremely addictive. If you notice, they're looking into alternative treatments for heroin addicts because treatment prospects are so low. Success in treatment is not very good because of how addictive heroin is. Next, psychogenic drugs. These are drugs that are a combination. They include hallucinogens and marijuana that produce increased feelings of relaxation and intoxication. Hallucinogens are drugs that cause false sensory messages. They alter our perception of reality. LSD is a very common one, also known as acid. They create powerful synthetic. It's a powerful synthetic hallucination. Hallucinogen. PCP is a synthesized drug now used as an animal tranquilizer that can cause stimulant, depressant, narcotic, or hallucinogenic effects. You have to watch out for these designer drugs. They can really mess a person up and cause a lot of problems. A lot of these designer drugs, you probably heard of MDMA or ecstasy or X. It's a designer drug that has both a stimulant and a hallucinogen effect. Stimulatory hallucinogens produce a mixture of psychomotor stimulant and hallucinogenic effects. Here's a survey if you want about hallucinogenic drugs. An interesting thing is that marijuana is considered a hallucinogenic drug. However, it's a mild hallucinogen derived from the leaves of flower of a type of hemp plant called cannabis sativa. The active ingredient is called THC, and that's the one that causes the effect of marijuana. Right now, marijuana does not create a person to be physically dependent, but over time can cause a person to be psychologically dependent. And depending on what state you live in, some states it's legal. Iowa or Nebraska, it's not legal, but if you go over to Colorado, it's legal. The big question is, should marijuana be legalized and controlled just like alcohol is? Some positives is a lot of people are sitting in prison because of the distribution and purchase of marijuana. The disadvantage is alcohol is the #1 addiction in the United States. Marijuana is a #3 addiction. If we make it legal, with more people having access to it, we have more people addicted to marijuana. So that's a question a lot of people are struggle with when they talk about making marijuana legal in their state. These charts basically show different drugs and how they affect us psychologically. You notice we have amphetamines, cocaine, nicotine, caffeine, and their adverse effects. Depressants and their adverse effects. And alcohol, narcotics, and hallucinogens. That concludes our session. If you have any questions, feel free to email me or look at the other links that are available in ROC. Have a great week.